Welcome to New York Got Game.
Welcome back to another edition of New York Got Game. The playoffs are over for the New York Knicks. They have been bounced. So you know what this episode is going to be. It's going to be a little bit of Knicks therapy for the fans out there. We're going to talk about what the Knicks have to do going forward. What is next for the New York Knickerbockers? That is the thing we're going to look at. We're not going to waste any time. Knicks fans, this is the episode you want, so let's get right into it.
The Knicks are heating up.
After a deep and at times gritty playoff run, the New York Knicks, they fell short in the Eastern Conference Finals, dropping Game 6 to the Indiana Pacers in a lopsided loss that left fans with mixed emotions, pride in the journey, but questions about what comes next. So, today on New York Got Game, we're going to bring in the Dean of Knicks Film School. His name is Jonathan Macri. He's going to help us make sense of it all, from Tom Thibodeau's long-term fit to the future of Karl-Anthony Towns and Muel Bridges, to what the front office must do to turn this core into a true title contender. You see jbback there. He joins me now. jbback, how are you doing? We were just talking about this. This has been a long playoff run. We know the players are exhausted at the end of it. The journalists are, the content creators are. Everybody's exhausted. The fans are. Everybody's exhausted.
Yeah, it has been a journey, and it's wild because, to hear you preface the conversation that we're about to have with we're going to try to figure out this thing and that thing and this other thing. Awful lot to figure out for a team that made it this far. And I don't know if that's a commonality in the NBA. I mean, I guess to a certain extent, if you don't win the championship, there's a lot of questions for every team. But it feels like for a team that made it as far as they did, there are an inordinate amount of uncertainties, shall we say, heading into the summer.
Yeah, and I think that's what has different people around this conversation feeling a different kind of way. And I'm glad to have this conversation with you because at the time of us recording this, we're almost about 24 hours since the Knicks have been eliminated from the playoffs, right? Because you had some of the raw emotion and reaction right after, and now we're going to try to get into it. So here we go, jbback. Now that the season is over, right, and you look at the season, this was the first Eastern Conference Finals appearance for the franchise in over 2 decades. It's been quite a long time. How do you think Knicks fans should view this season? Do they look at it as a whole step moving forward, or is this a missed opportunity?
I want nothing more, Dexter, and you know me. You know I try to emit positive vibes. I am Mr. Positivity whenever possible. I want to sit here and I should tell you, and be able to tell you that it is nothing more than a step forward. First conference finals, as you said, in 25 years. And not only is it the first conference finals in 25 years, it's not like in the second round of the playoffs, you beat some team that, got lucky, a first round luck and maybe upset someone because of injury or whatever the case may be. No, you went out there and you beat the defending champions. And I know history is going to misremember the Tatum injury, and it'll be said, oh, that Knicks team, yeah, they beat the Celtics, but that's the series that Tatum got injured, right? And that's the only reason they won. No. That series was headed to 3-1, regardless of the Tatum injury, and I feel confident that they would have figured out a way to win one of those last 3 games. This was a real run by a real team that could do some real nice things. All that being said, my 2 cents, I'm just one Knicks fan. I will always remember this as a missed opportunity. And I think that ultimately comes back to Game 1 of the Pacers series. It is something that I would imagine that every player who was involved in that moment, or those several minutes, as it were, will remember that probably for the rest of their lives, almost regardless of whether they are able to win a championship here in New York or not. But I find it very, very hard for as wonderful of an accomplishment as this season was, and I do feel that it was an impressive accomplishment to make it as far as they did in the manner that they did. These opportunities do not come around very often, and you just can't squander them. And unfortunately, I do think that they squandered this one.
So I think you answered that with a great deal of nuance there, John, because I think 2 things can be true, right? Can totally be a missed opportunity. At the same time, and you said this was a wonderful season, I think it's a successful season. I think there's no doubt you can say it's a successful season. But you can still feel the disappointment in it, right? It is still a missed opportunity, and to that point, you never know when you're going to get back there. You can say this about anything in life, anything that you're moving towards, right? Goals you're trying to reach. You don't know if you're going to get back to the conference finals. You don't know if this Knicks group will get back there. We hope that they can. It'll be fun for us to do all this stuff again. But you're right. We don't know. Now, next where I wanted to go with you, and I'm sure you have seen this on Knicks Film School and the post-game shows you do. I got to ask you about Tom Thibodeau because you have long been anointed president of the Tom Thibodeau fan club. I think some of that has been a little bit unfair. You and I have talked about this before. But Tibbs has been criticized by some fans, some media members for years. He even had some fans calling for him to be fired during the team's postseason run. Do you think Tibbs did enough to adjust throughout the playoffs, or do you think there should be a serious evaluation of his long-term fit going forward with this Knicks franchise?
Again, I am not giving you the hot takes that we probably want on these sorts of shows, but I'm going to split the baby here a little bit by saying this. I think that this playoff run, and really not even this playoff run, this season revealed that there are some real structural issues on this Knicks roster, and I know we're going to get into some of those things a little bit later in this conversation. Given those issues, and let's just call a spade, the fact that your two best players are both substandard defenders, and they just happen to play what should be the two most important positions on your defense. Your point of attack is your point guard, and then obviously your back line. I don't know that there's any coach out there that could have pulled a magic wand out of their back pocket and turned Karl-Anthony Towns into a consistent defender of the pick and roll. So, and if you believe, like I do to a large extent, that their fundamental issues lied in the inability to nail that one thing down. How do we figure out how to be a good enough defense against a top offense? And that's what this Indiana team was, with those issues. All that being said, if you're Leon Rose and you're not having some serious conversations about whether Tom Thibodeau gives your team the best shot at winning a title, meaning raises the ceiling. We could talk about, lineups and a rotation thing here and a rotation thing there. The minutes obviously have always been a big issue. That stuff is fine. I think that's more margin stuff. For me, I'm looking at, do we need to bring in a coach here who can kind of maybe not overhaul this offense, but to create an offense where you are really clearly getting the most out of the players on your roster? Because I just watched 100 games of this team. And I don't know about you, Dex. I never felt like I was watching a team that got the most out of each other for as talented as they were. And so that's kind of where I'm looking at it. And I think they should have a serious conversation. I'm not saying the man should be fired. Frankly, I don't think he probably should. But you got to at least talk about it.
I think that's fair. I think it's fair to at least talk about it. You and I are in the same vein with this in that I think that the offense really needs to be looked at because there's a lot of talent there on offense, but it feels like it's so laborious, right? Jaylen Brunson has to work. And I don't think Jaylen Brunson can work as hard as he has for 4 rounds of the playoffs if this your goal is to win the championship, right? Which it is, in the manner of how much is on his shoulders. We know how great he is, clutch player of the year, all that stuff. But you want to see him get easier buckets because the elite teams and the teams that will be playing in the finals, J-Mac, those teams get easy buckets. Yeah. The offense is not as laborious for them. Now, some of that has to do with something we'll get to in a bit, which is depth as well, too. That also matters. And we could get into all of that and there's some things about the coach, whether he would play the depth and all that stuff. But, yeah, I think this should be evaluated. I'm with you. I'm not on, hey, get Tibbs out of here. Because my question to those people would be, well, who are you bringing in? Now, one thing I'll also add, J-Mac, and I'm going to push this as a follow-up for you because I'm actually intrigued with something you said. You mentioned the offense and them trying to make the offense a little bit easier. And you said even bringing in a coach like that could do that possibly. What do you think about if it's not a head coach, but maybe somebody who's got an offensive mind that could come in as an associate coach under Tibbs? Do you think that could be a possibility for the Knicks this offseason?
Do we really think Tibbs is going to open up to an assistant? I mean,
no, I don't. I don't.
No, and look, again, you said it. I am the president of the Tom Thibodeau fan club, but one of the reasons I adore Tibbs and one of the reasons why I have an undying respect for him is someone that sticks to his beliefs. I think that is an admirable quality, and I think that is the quality that helped transform this team from, one that had the lowest over-under win total when he took over to a team that just made the Eastern Conference Finals. I think it was the right mentality at the time, and I think it was even the right mentality along the way. I just don't think he's the sort that's gonna come in and listen to some. And by the way, would that even work? We saw something similar attempted with Memphis this past offseason, and what did they wind up doing? They wound up cleaning house, and they didn't win a playoff game, and it absolutely blew up in their faces. So I think you are opening yourself up to disaster. If you really don't want to let go of Tibbs, bump him up to the front office. You just sign him into an extension, keep him employed, keep him as a part of the brain trust, and then go in and bring someone else if that's the way you want to go. But this is, no half measures here. He's either your coach or he's not your coach, and that's it.
I think that's fair. Now, one of the things about Tibbs, and this, J-Mac, from the fans have been adjustments. I've even become a little bit tired of that word. But we did see Tibbs change the starting lineup in the Pacers series. We saw him insert Mitchell Robinson in at center. Karl-Anthony Towns moved to the power forward in the series. And this brings me to Cat. How should the Knicks view Cat moving forward? Is he a 4?
Well,
is he a 5? Like, how are you looking at Cat moving forward?
If he's here moving forward, I think he has to be both. And I think, it's not a coincidence that over the course of the playoffs, you saw Karl-Anthony Towns and Mitchell Robinson share the floor for far longer than they did at any point in the regular season. The regular season, I think the most they ever played together in any one game was something like 8 minutes. Most of the time, it was 2-3 minutes, maybe a 5-minute stint. In your 18 playoff games, those guys were on the court together for 165 minutes, which is a little bit less, but about 9 minutes and change per game. I think that was a tacit acknowledgement by Tom Thibodeau that, look, Karl-Anthony Towns can only take us so far at the 5. We need to put a defensive first center next to him. Moving forward, maybe that if he's still on the team next year, that total goes up to 12 minutes a game or 15 minutes a game. At the same time, there's also going to be lots of opportunities for you to play Towns at the 5, especially in the regular season when you're playing teams that maybe aren't able to exploit you defensively. The thing that I find interesting and why I don't know if it's as simple as a Cat at the 4 or Cat at the 5 question. I'm just going to give it two very quick numbers here. With Towns and Robinson on the floor together, 165 minutes, I said. Overall in the playoffs, those numbers were good. They outscored teams by 4.4 points per 100 possessions, which playoffs, that's fine. And the more impressive number, 105.2 defensive rating. That's elite, any way you cut it. When you add Brunson into the mix, that's a lesser minute number. It's 98 minutes with Towns and Robinson and Brunson. All of a sudden, now you're getting outscored by 3.2 points per 100 possessions. Your offense gets actually about 5 points better, but your defense skyrockets to 117.3 defensive rating. It comes back to that fundamental question of whether you could survive against the top offenses if two of the players on the floor have targets on their back for the opposing team. And that's the question more than the Towns positional question that I think the Knicks need to answer this summer.
Yeah, they got to figure out what they're going to do with that because as you just mentioned there, the numbers with both of their all-NBA guys on the floor defensively, not good at all whatsoever. Now, keeping it with Cat, reports came out via The Athletic following the Knicks Game 6 loss in Naptown that there was internal frustration with Cat's defensive consistency this season. What was your reaction to that report? Because, and I want to be clear on something here because some fans were like, oh, this came out now and the timing of the report. And I think a lot of times people do not understand journalistically that is not the choice of the reporters. I just want to be very clear on that. So it's not like this was a malicious hit piece or anything like that. And I would also add, if you're on the team and you care about the defense, you would be upset about the defensive inconsistencies that you saw with Cat, right? But what was your feelings about this, J-Mac?
Well, regarding the journalistic side of it, I could just say from firsthand knowledge that the journalists who worked on that particular story had absolutely no control over when A, they were asked to write that story, and B, when that story was released.
Yep.
Number one. Number two, you asked me what do I think of it, or like what do I think when I hear that? I'm just happy that I don't, that I'm not sitting here feeling like I've been taking crazy pills for 7 months, because all season long we have watched this team engage in defensive coverages that were frankly inexplicable at times. And then they actually became even more inexplicable in the playoffs when it was very clear that they were adjusting their coverages to fit the opponents, in particular Boston, when they leaned more into switching, but even a little bit of some different kind of stuff against Detroit, and especially against Indiana. And then there would be these possessions or handfuls of possessions or entire quarters and halves where it would seem as if Karl-Anthony Towns was either being given different instructions from the rest of his teammates or wasn't being given any instructions at all. And to me, this report confirmed that this is a player, for whatever reason, at times did not, I don't know how else to put this, did not go along with what was supposed to be done. Even though all the other, or, his teammates who were on the floor with him seemed to be on the same page, but it was not the case for him. Is that an effort thing? Is that him trying to conserve energy because he feels like he needs to do more on the offensive end of the floor? I can't sit here and answer those questions. Obviously, I don't know that anybody can answer those questions. But it would be concerning to me if I was the front office, and it would give me pause before just saying, all right, another year together, maybe we'll make some tweaks and we'll just run it back, because this is now year 10. And if you of Karl-Anthony Towns, and if you go and ask any Minnesota fan about, is this out of the blue, or is this maybe something you guys have seen before? I guarantee you will get no shortage of hands shooting up into the air saying, "Oh, pick me! I have the answer to that one." This is not a new phenomenon with Karl-Anthony Towns. This has always been part of his repertoire. Unfortunately, it's about how do you handle it now if you are this organization.
Yeah, I wonder how it could be handled, J-Mac. You made a great point there that this is year 10. I'm always at the positivity of players can improve and get better to a certain degree. I'm not sure if that happens now with it being year 10, but it is an issue because you need him to be better defensively. I do not think that this was a team issue in terms of that, hey, this is something to be concerned about, or there was some strife in the locker room. Like, I don't think it's that.
No.
I just think it's, hey, when you play on a team, when you work at your job, whatever it is that you do, when you're working with other people, you want other people to be doing what they're supposed to be doing to make your job go as smoothly as possible, right? So it's I'm not surprised that this came out, or not in the reporting of it, which was good and fine. I just think I'm not surprised at it at all.
Dex, how good would you be at your job if every day you walked into the studio, you had no idea whether your producer was going to be able to get you air on time, or mic you up properly, or have the right camera on you, or have the recording, feed the way it was supposed to be? I have to think you would probably be a little rattled. You might not be at your best when you walked in and sat in that chair every day. You know?
Right. Just like everybody else, you need the team around you, right? You need that supporting. And if somebody's not doing something on the team, you can't be shocked when someone comes out and says, hey, this isn't right. This has happened in all of our jobs, and can't forget that. So good point there. Yeah. Another player we got to talk about that was acquired by the team last offseason, Mikal Bridges. The Mikal Bridges experience, J-Mac, I think I'm being nice here this season, was a rocky one, right? We saw him shy away from physicality all season. He was inconsistent as a point of attack defender, but there were some good things, right? Because in the playoffs, he was pretty damn good defensively, especially against the Pistons and the Celtics. And the Knicks, they've got to decide whether or not to give an extension to this guy who they gave up a ton of assets for. So my question here is, should the team continue the Mikal Bridges experience or elongate the Mikal Bridges experience? What do you say to that?
It's funny how much narratives could change over the course of time. I'm not going to use the choice language that we have for at Knicks Film School, but we made a T-shirt after the Boston series that essentially said, to heck with all of the picks that we gave up to Brooklyn to acquire Mikal Bridges, because he was so instrumental in winning that Boston series. Now, you look at the numbers from the Boston series, his numbers weren't that great, but he came up big when it counted. And in particular, in the fourth quarters, he was very good. He made big-time defensive plays. He made shots, the whole thing. Yet, if you look at his numbers overall in the postseason, and I've been citing these over the last week or so, he was a minus 69 when he was on the court over the course of 706 minutes over 18 games. That ranked 213th out of 219 players that appeared in the playoffs. The bottom two were Russell Westbrook and Peyton Watson on the Denver Nuggets, who had the misfortune of often playing without Nikola Jokic and playing against the machine that is the Oklahoma City Thunder. And then the other four players below Mikal Bridges on the list all played for Miami, who didn't win a game and got absolutely steamrolled by the Cleveland Cavaliers in round one. Those are the only players who had a worse plus-minus than Mikal Bridges in these playoffs. And I do not think that plus-minus number is indicative of how he played to a T, but I also don't think it is a complete and total coincidence. And I just, if I'm the Knicks, the Towns thing is much less confusing to me, actually, because we know exactly what Karl-Anthony Towns is. We've known what he has been for years, and you kind of knew what you were getting when you traded for him. What I'm wondering, if I'm the front office for the Knicks, is how much of Mikal Bridges' struggles this season had to do with him having to be the other half of the Karl-Anthony Towns pick-and-roll defensive combination. How much of it had to do with him slotting into what was clearly, at times, a very uncomfortable offensive role where he was essentially asked to go, space to the corner or space to the wing and just kind of wait there. And that gets into questions about the coach, So all of these things are kind of tied together. I'm willing to go into year two of the Mikal Bridges experience with open eyes and an open mind and an open heart. But yes, to paraphrase your point, I do not think we could sit here and call this season for Mikal Bridges an unabashed success.
You said open eyes, open mind, open heart, open checkbook. Are you doing that for Mikal Bridges?
Look, he's under contract next year. I think they are well within their right to negotiate a little bit. Now, look, we know this front office. They do not take players into the final year of their contract. And if they do, there's a very good chance that player is going to get traded. So if the Knicks did not come to an extension with Mikal Bridges, and look, I think you could pay him $30 or more million a year. I don't know if you have to give him the full max extension that he is eligible for, which is essentially the same thing as the Jaylen Brunson contract. I don't know if you need to give him that, or at least not on day one of your negotiations. But I'm sure there's a number. It's probably going to be a big number. But look, this is what you do in the NBA today. You got to pay to play.
You got to pay to play. All right, we'll see how the Mikal Bridges experience is moving forward. Now, J-Mac, as the Knicks enter this offseason, and you said there's a lot to talk about. There's multiple questions, I think, about depth with this team, which is number one on my list, I think, if you're looking at this Knicks team. What types of players or skill sets do you think they need to target in order to strengthen their rotation moving forward?
I'd love a 6'7", 6'8" wing who could shoot the ball and
everybody would. Yeah.
Put the ball. I was about to say, yeah. So we're 29 other teams. I do think. Again, it's all of these questions, Dex. It's obviously not anyone's fault. Everything overlaps because I could sit here and I could tell you, well, they need a shooter who Tom Thibodeau is going to trust to put into the starting five. Assuming Karl-Anthony Towns is back, you need to be able to maximize that 5-out spacing. Clearly, Tom Thibodeau always had an issue with playing Deuce McBride heavy minutes. It just seems like he has an aversion to playing two small guards at the same time. Obviously, Jaylen Brunson is on this roster. It was that way with Emmanuel Quickly. It's that way with Deuce McBride. But do you need to be thinking of things from that perspective if, again, you go in a different direction at head coach? Is it suddenly as big of a priority to get a player that is a little bit of a bigger player and that can maybe shoot the basketball? For me, I think the answer to the depth question comes down to whether Karl-Anthony Towns is on the... Actually, you know what? It may not... I was about to say, it comes down to whether Karl-Anthony Towns is on the roster next year. Because if Karl-Anthony Towns is on the roster next year, I think you could probably get away with Mitchell Robinson and a minimum signing center, or maybe even, you're comfortable with Huck Porty as your third big. If you shake it up, then I think you really have to explore the market and see what depth is available out there for a big man. Just because Mitchell Robinson, who this was Mitch's postseason, to be very clear, could not have played better, but we know that you don't necessarily want to rely on Mitch to play 82 games.
Yeah, no, we do know that. What you just said kind of leads me into where I wanted to go next, because
sure,
when you look at, we're talking about depth, and I do think that's something the Knicks need to add, and you're right, some size, shooting, that would be all helpful, particularly whether you're putting that in the starting lineup or that would be coming off the bench. But when you look at this current core, J-Mac, Brunson, Towns, Bridges, Hart, and Anunoby, and I think this is the major question, because you're talking about looking at everything and all the pieces, is that core enough to win a title, or do you think a significant move still needs to be made, such as maybe moving off of a big piece, whether it's a Karl-Anthony Towns or someone else, to better balance the roster? And I say that, the reason I asked a question like that, I just want to be very clear. I know you've heard it. There's a lot of the Giannis rumors. Fans want Giannis. They think the Knicks need another star. I don't think they need to do that. I'm going to be clear on that. But do you think they need to move off somebody and better balance the roster, because the balance isn't there, as you mentioned, with the shooting, Hart in the starting lineup as a non-shooter, et cetera? What do you think? Do you think a significant move like that still needs to be made?
No, I mean, look, to the fans who want Giannis, I mean, I want a Porsche. You know. Yeah, no lease either. I just want someone to give me a Porsche.
Just give you the car and the keys. Let you drive it.
That's it.
There you go.
No paperwork. Just hand it over, please. No, I mean, look, I don't want to say never. Never say never. Look, when you're talking about a player of Giannis Antetokounmpo's caliber, who we've never seen him throw his weight around in terms of trying to dictate his next move, then again, he got his team to go trade for Drew Holiday, and then a couple years later got his team to go trade for Damian Lillard. So I don't know. So I'm not going to say don't put it past. I think it's until Giannis gets traded somewhere else, or I guess decides he wants to go back to Milwaukee. Don't rule it out. I'm not counting on that. And I said it last night on my post-game show, and this is going to make me a very unpopular figure amongst a large segment of the fan base, but I'm going to say it anyway. I think if and we've all been told for months that there is going to be a Kevin Durant sweepstakes happening this summer, I would at least put it up on the whiteboard there in, Fort Penn Plaza, wherever the hell their offices are, and just say, all right, if we started from a place of we send Towns out, because that's the money you'd have to send out, and we brought back Durant, which, to be extraordinarily clear, I have no idea. Nobody has any idea if that's something the Phoenix Suns have any interest in doing. Who the heck knows? But to bring back a more traditional scoring force, a more traditional offensive engine, and one that even at his advanced age, you could at least trust to hold his own on the defensive side of the floor, I would just map out, if they made that move, what might the rest of, how can we fill out the roster from there, and that involves the salary cap, that involves dealing with the apron issues that come along with that, and all sorts of other things. Other than that, I there's no obvious move to me on the board. I don't know if maybe you've thought of something, Dexter, but it's tough for as much talent might be on the move this summer. The Knicks are in kind of a interesting place, because a lot of stars out there, you look at their theoretical fit and you say, yeah, but that doesn't add up for this reason or that reason. So, I think they're in a tricky spot, but they need to keep their ears open.
I think they will keep their ears open. Have I thought of any other moves? No, I don't think they need to add another big name. I'm out. Maybe this is an unpopular comment for me. I'm out on Durant.
Okay, I respect it.
Yeah, because he's 37. Look, I know a lot of people want big names, J-Mac. I know you hear this. I'm not saying that you're that guy, because I know you are. I think this team, but I see that. I want to be very clear here. The logic you're going with is that Durant would be an upgrade on defense from Cat, which is absolutely true, right? Absolutely true. Now, can you trust his durability over Cat? That
Well,
I'm not so sure about. Um, I think this team could be fine making moves on the margins, getting a little bit deeper. I think some of that's going to come with maybe hitting on one of the guys they drafted this year, whether it's Tyler Kolek, whether it's Ariel Purdy, whether it's Become Dadier. That also ties into what this is coming back to what you said. This all ties into where the coach played them. I will say this, and we can talk about this, J-Mac. I think it's imperative, and this will kind of lead to the last couple things before we wrap up here. I think it's imperative that next year the Knicks are playing throughout the regular season 9-10 deep. You can no longer go 7-8 in the NBA. The elite teams are doing that, and I think they have to get deeper. And I think they have, the core is fine, but I think they've got two things. They've got to get deeper. They've got to get better defensively. And let's be honest. Let's keep it a buck here. It starts with their two All-NBA players. I don't know if they can get better on defense, but they have to get better on defense if they are going to.
Can I back you up real quick?
Yeah, go ahead.
Because here's why your anti-Durant stance, why it makes a lot of sense if you look at it a certain way to me. If before this season, someone asked you, well, what's more valuable, Isaiah Hartenstein and Dante DiVincenzo, or Karl-Anthony Towns? I think most people would be like, well, hold on. One guy is a 4-time All-Star. He's made 2 All-NBA teams. He's a 25, he's like you could build your offense kind of around him. At worst, he's a number 2 guy. These other 2 guys, like, they just became full-time starters like this year. Really, I mean, really good players, part of a successful Knicks team. But I think I think a lot of people would have been like, yeah, I think it's Towns. If you swapped out Towns on this for Isaiah Hartenstein and Dante DiVincenzo, I think forget about Game 7. I think the Knicks are already in the finals. Now, obviously, I don't say that to be like, oh, go trade Karl-Anthony Towns and bring back Isaiah Hartenstein and Dante DiVincenzo. That's not my point. My point is, are there players out there who are perceived as more role player types that you can, if you were going to make a big move, instead of trying to bring back a big name, you bring back those players that you are just more certain, you know what? They may not be the name, they may not have the scoring prowess of Towns, but they fit with what we want to do here. And they will start to bring the team back to the level of consistency that they had a year ago with that team that we all fell in love with. I just don't know if that's feasible.
Yes.
And maybe it is, maybe it isn't. I don't know.
No, you and I are on the same page with, or at least you're supporting my point in that I think if you're going to make a move, that's the kind of move you could kind of make. Now, I don't know who those players are. I'm not saying that's necessarily feasible, but I think that might be one of the lessons that fans could take away from the season, right? Sometimes the bigger name, I'm not saying that Towns can't be a good fit, but it's not always a good fit. I'm sort of putting caution to it, should I say, J-Mac, with going forward that maybe trying to add another big name, whether it's KD or Giannis, isn't necessarily going to solve the issues that you're trying to solve to get to where you want to go. Now, speaking of getting to where they want to go, when you look league-wide at the whole thing, right, because some of these teams, they're not going anywhere, at least we don't think anytime soon. The Thunder, the Pacers, the T-Wolves, the Cavs, they're going to be in the mix for the title. Do you still believe the Knicks can be a top-tier contender next season? And I'll throw another thing on that, whether they stand pat and run this back with pretty much the same squad or they make some changes.
I'm going to say yes, with the caveat that Oklahoma City might just be in a tier of their own. They were pushed to 7 games by Denver. That was also a series in which the Thunder lost one game that was almost as unconscionable as the game 1 with Knicks versus Pacers. And then another game on top of that they should have won and didn't win at the end. So the Thunder may just be, to borrow a Warriors term, like light years ahead. I don't see anyone else in that discussion. So for all intents and purposes, yes. I mean, at the very least in the East, I think the Knicks are in that top tier. And I don't think I don't even think that's a controversial opinion. I think we've seen enough again, regardless of whether they bring the same team back or whether they maybe make a change or two.
No, I definitely agree. Let's try to end with some positivity. Try to give some hope
Sure.
to the Knicks fans. I know as somebody, as you and I both who were, covering the team and making content around the team, look, I still think you got to step back and say, okay, like I enjoyed this run. Did you want it to go further? Sure. But for you, when you look back at this, I know it's just been 24 hours, but what was the most memorable moment of the 2025 playoff run to you? Was it a particular game, performance, or particular sequence maybe that captured the magic for you? What was the most memorable moment for J-Mac during this run?
What you're asking me? What was the most memorable moment, or what was the most memorable moment that captured the magic? Because those are two different answers, my friend.
You're right. You know what? Give me both. We'll take both.
Well, I don't need to tell you what the game one against Indiana. I will remember that until this team wins a championship.
That's memorable in the wrong way. That's memorable in the negative way. But yes, I hear you. It's
That's-
memorable
it's
still.
just-
You're right.
Yeah, it's an unfortunate reality. But on the other side of the ledger, there are so many moments. I think for me, interestingly enough, because it didn't have like the moment, like that like one shot or one defensive play, but I will always remember Game 4 against Boston. And specifically, I will remember Jason Tatum coming out on the Garden floor in the second half of that game and putting on his best Kobe Bryant impersonation, trying to will his team back to a tie series. And I think at that point, again, putting his injury aside, if they had tied the series 2-2 and Tatum doesn't get hurt, I think they win the series. And the Knicks, and in particular Jaylen Brunson, having an answer for Jason Tatum every time, withstanding the punch, and then finally in that fourth quarter pulling away to the point where the OG Anunoby steal and dunk it felt like a nail in the coffin, put even irrespective of the Tatum injury. That game is there was no moment this playoff run where I was personally more impressed and more proud of my team and happy with how the team performed than in Game 4 against Boston. I think that was a really, really special one.
It absolutely was. I think a lot of Knicks fans would agree with that one. Final thing for me, J-Mac, from your vantage point, and my colleague Mike Vaccaro, great columnist for the New York Post, he wrote a good column today about the Knicks going forward and what he thinks Leon Rose should do for this team going forward, and maybe why Knicks fans should have faith in what Leon Rose has already done. Do you think Knicks fans should feel optimistic right now about the future? And if so, what is the biggest reason for hope for this team moving forward?
Yes, they should. And the biggest reason for hope is Jaylen Brunson. It was Jaylen Brunson before the season. It's Jaylen Brunson after the season. And I say that in full acknowledgement of the fact that Jaylen Brunson had, I don't know if it was his worst playoff game in Game 6 against the Pacers, but it was the most disappointing playoff game he's had. To me, he is still the biggest reason for hope. He's still the biggest reason to believe that this team is going to wind up one of these years with a parade down the Canyon of Heroes. The only thing that I will add to that, and that's because, there have been better players than Jaylen Brunson stuck in situations where you look at the situation and you say, well, that's a hopeless situation. That's not a title contending team. Heck, we were talking about Giannis before, right? Look at Giannis and look at the Bucks. It was like almost overnight that situation went from something where, okay, maybe the Bucks are a title contender to, oh wow, now where is Giannis going to play next? So it's not just Jaylen Brunson, but it is Jaylen Brunson on top of the fact that they have for as much as we're sitting here and talking about, should they move Towns? What could they get for Towns? Mikal Bridges extension, the whole thing. They're in a really good spot. I don't think they have a single negative contract on their books. Even Towns, I know he makes a lot of money. If they want to move Towns, they'll find a home for Towns and they'll get something real for Towns. It's just a matter to me of what moves do they make and can they strike the right balance, which is so much easier said than done because they were never quite able to do it this season. And can they maybe do it moving forward, for the year and years ahead?
Look, team building is not easy. Team building is not easy. We will see how it is for the Knicks going forward. There'll be a lot of questions that will be answered this offseason. You will be doing a lot more content on that, I'm sure. Same here on New York Got Game. I'm sure I'll have you back to discuss some stuff once we get to free agency. It'll be a busy next couple of months, my friend. But I appreciate you coming on because I thought you're the perfect person to talk after this. You've been very emotionally invested. You've been talking to the fans. It has been a wild ride through these playoffs. Sadly, it came to an end. But I agree with you. I think there's reason for hope. I think the future can still be bright for the New York Knicks. That is Jonathan Macri, the Dean of Knicks Film School. Please check him out and support the guys at KFS. They do such a great job. J-Mac, we'll talk to you soon, man. I'm sure we really will. We're talking a lot more Knicks hoops soon, I'm sure.
I always appreciate you taking the time for me, Dex. And, I mean this when I say it. We are in this together. We both very much want to see this team go all the way one of these years, hopefully, sooner rather than later.
Hopefully sooner rather than later. Thank you, my friend. Appreciate it. All right, so we put a bow on the Knicks season. I think there's a lot of feelings, a lot of emotions that Knicks fans can have about this particular season. But I think as we just talked about with Jonathan Macri of Knicks Film School, you got to look at this season as a success. I get that Game 1 against Indiana is always going to linger in the minds of Knicks fans. And it is going to feel a bit like a missed opportunity. As I said, two things can absolutely be true. But when I think you look at this team and the moves they had made the previous offseason, getting Muel Bridges, getting Karl-Anthony Towns, if I asked a lot of Knicks fans out there if you would have taken a trip to the Eastern Conference Finals, I think a lot of you would have said yes. I think if I asked you on the way in that trip to the Eastern Conference Finals, they beat the Boston Celtics, I think a lot of people would have signed up for that, right? And that's the beauty of the journey. There's a lot that goes into team building. There's a lot in the process of where a team is trying to get to. And I think if you're a Knicks fan and you think about where this team was just 5 years ago, laughing stock in the league, one of the lowest win totals in the league. And now they had a season where they were just 2 wins away from the NBA Finals. You got to feel good about that. They're knocking on the door. They're close. These are not your same old Knicks. They are right there. They've had some shrewd moves. Are they perfect? No. Are there still some flaws on this team? Are there limitations? Are there things they need to clean up? Absolutely. But I think if you're a Knicks fan and you've taken a little bit of time away from the sting of just losing to, I get it, the hated Indiana Pacers, you got to be proud of this team. Now, you want to see if they can get to that next level. And that's the question. That's what we talked about right here in this episode. That's what we want to see if the Knicks can do, and there's still work to doing that. Championship success is not built overnight. It takes time. It takes patience. It takes a vision. And now we got to see if the front office can execute that vision in terms of getting this team some depth. Do they decide on if the coach is the right coach for them going forward, or do they make another move? Can they develop young players who can contribute to winning into the rotation? Those are all questions we will be looking to see if they are answered this summer as we move forward with this show. But now, the show, we're still going to talk about the Knicks, and we're going to turn in a couple weeks looking at the draft, what the Nets can do there. And we also got to talk about the Liberty, who are off to a fantastic start at 7-0. And for some people like me, I think they're actually better than they were last year. So it's going to be very interesting to see what they can do. But as I said, if you're a fan of the New York Knickerbockers, you got to be really encouraged by what you saw this season. It was a legit run. It was a good run. It didn't end exactly the way you wanted. But I think looking back, you can be very proud of what the Knickerbockers did. That's going to do it for this edition of New York Got Game. As always, got to thank the people that make this show look so good. Shout out to my editor, Corey Porter, production assistant, Tommy Cohen, producer, a.k.a. the Grand Poobah of New York Got Game, my guy, Nick Federico, doing a great job. We'll be back next week with more basketball talk from New York City to talk so much about going around in the Big Apple. I'm Dexter Henry. We'll catch you next time on New York Got Game.
And thanks for watching New York Got Game. Boom shakalaka.